Imagine the North Atlantic on March
of the
17,
air war.
1943.
It preserves a
Wind howling, water heaving in 15-foot walls, and a steel procession of 41 merchant ships battling their way 400 meters south of
fulfilling a
Iceland.
promise.
Convoy
To bring the bombers Hemrod to Emden is a genuine
through the chaos, bearing 140,000 tons of precious cargo toward a Britain starving for supplies. Picture yourself stepping inside the galley of one
They
of those
always
vessels,
say, "Good
the
luck,
SS
sir,
Liberty
see you later."
ship, where
Sometimes
28-year-old
they may
cook
say,
William Eustace
"How about
steadies
lending me a
himself
pound
against
until
the
tomorrow,
merchant eye.
boss?"
Nearby,
And now the time
Thomas Tommy Lawson scrubs dishes, bracing his feet as the ship rolls so violently it seems intent on throwing him across the room. Dear friends, if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right now, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments, and make sure to watch the video until the end. Up above, on the bridge, Captain James Bannerman lifts his binoculars to the horizon.
With the new power
He doesn't
plant
need to
that
see
led
the
to
threat
use
to
of
know it's there. The U-boats are listening. Somewhere in those dark waters, the hunters are already in motion. Slip beneath the waves for a moment, 600 yards off the port beam of the convoy. In the cramped control room of U-758, Captain Lieutenant Helmuth Monsek watches his young hydrophone operator press headphones tightly against his ears.
officer reaches for the
sailor barely
telephone.
breathes
Briefing
as
at
he murmurs,
13:30 hours.
"Contact
Got
bearing 280. Then comes the chilling follow-up. Multiple screws. Heavy machinery. An estimated 40 vessels.
the 56th
Mansek's lips
Thunderbolt
curl
Group.
into a smile. The Wolfpack is
And
in
in each
perfect
squadron
position.
now, the pilots
Yet
are
in
taking
that
it
moment,
easy.
neither Captain
They know
Bannerman
a job
nor
is
Captain Lieutenant Mansek has the faintest idea that Tommy Lawson, the man elbow-deep in soapy dishwater, has begun to notice something peculiar about how Liberty ships sound underwater. Something so subtle and unexpected that it will alter the entire Battle of the Atlantic. 6 days later, the ocean will claim 22 merchant ships from convoys, HX-229 and SCD-122. 300 merchant seamen will vanish into the freezing deep. It will become the worst convoy disaster since 1942. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, will proclaim it the greatest convoy battle ever fought. And the numbers behind his declaration?
At an 8th
Nothing
Air Force
short of
fighter base
catastrophic.
on the invasion coast of
In March
England,
1943
the commander of a combat
U-boats
wing
sink
pins DFCs on
567,000
Thunderbolt
tons of
pilots.
Allied shipping.
They
more
won
than any
those
other
medals
month
in
of
the
war.
Battle of Germany,
At that rate,
escorting our
Britain
bombers
has a
to
mere
their
3
targets.
months of food remaining.
Ramrod
Even Winston
is the
Churchill will
fighter's
later confess. The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril. German hydrophone technology is mercilessly efficient. A U-boat can detect the roar of convoy propellers from 80 nautical miles away. A single merchant ship advertises its presence from as far as 12 miles. Its acoustic fingerprint cavitating propellers, trembling engines. The resonance of the hull acts like a shining beacon for incoming torpedoes. Allied escort vessels try everything zigzag maneuvers, enforced radio silence, relentless ASDIC sweeps. But none of it matters. The convoys are simply too loud. Sound travels through seawater like rumor through a crowded tavern, and the wolf packs know how to listen. They wait motionless at 400 feet, hydrophones poised, until the moment for a perfect strike arrives. What the Allies don't realize, what no admiral, engineer, or scientist suspects, is that the breakthrough they desperately need won't come from a laboratory or a naval architect. It will come from a ship's cook who left school at 14. Now shift scenes. Naval Headquarters, Liverpool, March 1943. The Western Approaches Command has battled the U-boats for 3.5 grinding years. Every conceivable tactic has been tried. Back in 1941, the Royal Navy equipped all its escort ships with ASDIC sonar. The system can detect a submerged U-boat at 2,500 yards, but only if the submarine sits dead ahead. The U-boats quickly adapt, slipping in from the stern or the beam, neatly avoiding the ASDIC cone. Worse still, ASDIC is powerless against surfaced U-boats, making nighttime attacks the Wolfpack's preferred method. Then in 1942, scientists at the Admiralty Research Laboratory unveiled high-frequency direction finding, HUF-DUF, a system to track U-boat radio transmissions. It works brilliantly, at least until the Wolfpack locates a convoy. Then the submarines fall silent. They listen. And all the while, Allied ships continue broadcasting their every movement with the steady beat of their propellers. By early 1943, the Royal Navy has poured $8.7 million equivalent to $560 million today into solving the acoustic signature crisis. Professor Patrick Blackett, head of Naval Operational Research, issues a classified report bluntly stating, "Merchant vessel propeller cavitation and machinery resonance create underwater sound profiles detectable at extreme range. Without fundamental hull redesign, impossible during wartime production, convoys will continue to announce their positions to enemy hydrophones." Experts agree. You simply cannot silence a merchant ship enough to escape detection. Dr. Harold Burris, chief naval architect at the Admiralty, lays out the physics in a memo dated February 14, 1943. A Liberty ship's propeller spins at 76 RPM under load, forcing 250,500 tons of water through a 15-foot diameter screw. The collapsing cavitation bubbles generate a thunderous spectrum of acoustic energy across 1/100 kilowatts exactly. The frequency range optimized for German hydrophones. To reduce this noise would require a complete overhaul of the propulsion system, 6 months in dry dock per ship, and industrial capabilities the Allies simply do not have. And the clock is ticking. Britain relies on the sea for 2/3 of its food and all of its petroleum. In March 1943, German U-boats sink ships faster than Allied yards can build them. For 3 straight months, tonnage lost exceeds tonnage launched. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray of the Royal Canadian Navy delivers a grim, unvarnished verdict. Gentlemen, picture the tension in that briefing room. The air itself seems to tighten as the words fall like hammer blows. We're losing. And indeed, the truth is brutal. Our escorts are deafened by the roar of our own convoys. The U-boats, lurking in the cold Atlantic darkness, can pick up our presence from 50 meters away, while we remain blind to theirs. Let me ask you this. How do you fight an enemy who hears every heartbeat of your fleet, while you stumble forward in a cloak of your own noise? Unless this acoustic detection dilemma is cracked open. Right now, we are poised to lose the Atlantic by summer. Ideas come flooding in. A British naval engineer steps forward with a proposal as heavy as the price tag it carries. He suggests installing sound-dampening mounts on every piece of machinery aboard every merchant ship. Imagine that. Every pump, every engine, every generator wrapped in silence. But then the numbers crash down like cold water. $250,000 per vessel and 12 weeks in dry dock. With 2,400 merchant ships grinding across the Atlantic convoy lines, the calculation is merciless. At that pace, the retrofitting wouldn't finish for 138 years. An American scientist tries a different angle. Coat the holes in rubber-soft, forgiving, sound-absorbing rubber. It's tested. It fails. Salt water chews through it in weeks. The added drag steals 3 precious knots from every ship, slowing convoys to a crawl and making them even fatter targets for their hunters. A Canadian engineer presents a dream. Swept-back propeller blades designed to hush cavitation. Brilliant in theory, impossible in practice. Retooling every propeller foundry in North America and scrapping 14,000 existing propellers. A fantasy, shimmering for a moment before sinking beneath the weight of reality. And so, by March 15, 1943, Allied naval commanders finally accept the bitter conclusion. There is no technological salvation for convoy acoustic signatures. The merchant fleet will continue to shout its position into the deep, and every U-boat within earshot will come running. The only hope pile on more escorts, more aircraft, and pray enough ships slip through to keep Britain alive. But far out in the storm-racked Atlantic, 800 miles to the west, aboard a Liberty ship bucking under a North Atlantic gale, a cook is about to overturn every expert opinion. Meet Thomas Patrick Lawson. No engineering degrees, no formal technical training. Born in South Boston in 1915, he leaves school at 14 to help his family survive the Great Depression. He works the grill at a diner, then scrubs pots and fries eggs in the cramped galleys of coastal freighters. When war erupts, he joins the U.S. Merchant Marine at 26, not to be a hero, but because $125 a month is triple what he earns in Boston. His captain's June 1942 evaluation is as uninspired as cold oatmeal. Lawson TP, ship's cook, adequate performance, no leadership potential, recommended for galley duties only. Nobody expects brilliance from the man who cracks eggs at dawn. Yet after the William Eustace survives 3 convoy runs to Liverpool, Lawson develops a peculiar obsession. In his off-watch hours, he descends into the engine room simply to listen. The crew think he's lost his mind. First mate Robert Chen mutters, "Tommy's going to get himself killed down there. That engine room is hot as hell and twice as loud." But heat doesn't deter Lawson, because he sensed something no one else seems to notice. February 19th, 1943, Mid-Atlantic. Convoy SC-18 churns across the waves, 63 ships in 9 columns. Lawson is deep in the engine room during a U-boat alert. He crouches near the main steam line. Donald M'Leod, the ship's engineer, a burly Scotsman with a voice like gravel, shouts over the turbine thunder, "Get back to your galley, cook. This is no place for the ship shutters." A torpedo has slammed into a vessel 2 columns over. And then Lawson hears it, not the blast itself, but the aftermath. Through the trembling steel, he detects a strange hollow, booming resonance as seawater pours into the wounded ship. And then silence. The U-boat can no longer hear it. Lawson grips M'Leod's arm. The sinking ship, it stopped making noise. Of course it stopped, M'Leod snaps. It's full of water. No, I mean, Lawson struggles to articulate the spark that's just ignited in his mind. When water floods the hull, it kills the machinery vibration. The U-boat can't hear it anymore. M'Leod glares at him. Lawson presses on. What if we could flood parts of our ship on purpose? Not enough to sink us, just enough to mute the vibration. M'Leod's expression hardens into pure disbelief. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Back to the galley. But Tommy Lawson isn't done. For 2 weeks he scribbles diagrams in a battered notebook. Water-filled chambers around the propeller shaft. Ballast tanks hugging the machinery mounts. Systems for controlled flooding. Every sketch is a gamble against ridicule. He shows them to M'Leod, who scoffs. He shows them to the first mate, who laughs. He shows them to Captain Bannerman, who sighs and says, "Son, I appreciate your initiative, but leave the engineering to the engineers." No one listens to the cook. March 24th, 1943. The William Eustace docks in Liverpool, and Lawson has a precious 48 hours of shore leave. What he does next is unauthorized, risky, and borderline insane. He marches straight into the Western Approaches Command headquarters and asks calmly to speak with an admiral about U-boats. He doesn't get an admiral. He gets arrested. 2 Royal Navy Shore Patrol officers intercept him in the lobby of Derby House, the nerve center of Western Approaches Command. "You can't be here, mate," one growls, seizing his arm. "Restricted facility." "I need to talk to someone about convoy noise," Lawson insists. "I have an idea." "Everyone's got ideas, Yank. Clear off." They're hauling him toward the exit when a voice cuts across the lobby. Wait. Commander Peter Gretton, only 29, yet already hardened by 2 years of escort group command steps forward. Fresh from convoy ONS Swamp 5, where he lost 13 merchant ships to wolf packs, he is exhausted, furious, and desperate for anything that might tilt the odds. "What did you say about convoy noise?" he asks. Lawson recounts his discovery, the sinking ship's sudden silence, the notion of water dampening machinery vibration. Gretton listens, arms folded tightly. When Lawson finishes, the commander growls, "That's the most ridiculous thing I've heard this month. Water inside a ship is called sinking." "Not if you control it," Lawson fires back. Small chambers around the propeller shaft, tanks braced against the engine mounts. You're not flooding the whole ship. You're building acoustic insulation. Gretton is about to dismiss him when something shifts in his face. "Say that again." Acoustic insulation. Water absorbs vibration better than air. If you put water-filled chambers against... "I know what acoustic insulation is," Gretton snaps. But now his eyes are narrowed in concentration. He straightens. "Come with me." March 25th, 1943. Picture yourself stepping into HM Dockyard in Liverpool gray skies, the clang of metal against metal, and the ever-present smell of oil and salt. It's here that Commander Gretton introduces Tommy Lawson to the battered corvette HMS Sunflower, now resting in dry dock for repairs. Gretton's voice drops as he gestures toward the ship. "If this works, and that's a monumental if we test it here, quietly, on a small scale, no one else needs to know." What follows feels almost like a secret rite, performed under the cover of steel beams and welding sparks. For 3 long days, Lawson, Gretton, and the Sunflower's engineer, Lieutenant James Whitby, improvise a prototype using whatever they can scavenge. They weld empty oil drums around the corvette's propeller shaft housing, then fill those makeshift chambers with seawater. Sandbags are hauled in to mimic the weight of water pressing against the engine mounts. The whole contraption looks crude, almost laughably so. It's ugly. And by every rule in the Royal Navy's handbook, it's absolutely forbidden. Then comes March 28th, 1943, the moment of truth. The Sunflower eases into the Mersey River at low speed. A submarine, HMS Trespasser, slips beneath the surface 500 yards away, hydrophones primed and waiting. Lawson stands on the Sunflower's deck, barely daring to breathe. Minutes crawl by. Then Trespasser breaks the surface and signals. They heard everything. Engine noise, propeller cavitation. No change at all. A clean failure. Whitby mutters under his breath, "Told you it was bloody stupid." But Lawson's mind is already racing. "We filled the drums while the ship was still in dry dock," he says slowly. "They're not full anymore. They've drained through the seams. They need to be sealed. Watertight." Gretton drags a hand through his hair, torn between frustration and fear. "If the Admiralty finds out I modified a warship without authorization, I'll be court-martialed." Lawson's reply is so quiet that it forces him to listen. "If the Admiralty finds out U-boats are sinking 20 ships a week because we're too proud to test a cook's idea, we lose the war." For a long moment, Gretton simply stares at him. Then he nods once. 3 more days, he says. After that, the experiment ends. They work as though time itself is chasing them. Welding sealed steel chambers, adding water-filled rubber bladders around the engine mounts, building the foundation for what naval engineers will eventually call liquid acoustic dampening. April 2nd, 1943, the second test. This time, the Sunflower powers ahead at full speed. Trespasser, now 1,000 yards away, sinks beneath the waves again. Minutes pass. Silent, suffocating minutes. Then the submarine surfaces. "We lost you at 400 yards, the captain reports. Hydrophones picked up nothing but ambient ocean noise. Gretton's face goes pale. Say that again. At 400 yards, you disappeared. Whatever you did to that ship, it works. Lawson closes his eyes, his hands trembling. It works. 1 day later, April 3rd, 1943. The stakes move from the spray of the river to the carved wood and polished brass of the Admiralty boardroom in London. Commander Gretton has demanded an emergency audience with Rear Admiral Max Horton, the Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches, and he brings Lawson with him, much to the horror of the Admiral's staff. A merchant cook, an aide whispers in disbelief. Inside, Horton himself, a legendary submariner from the First World War, enters with 3 senior officers and Dr. Harold Burris, the very naval architect who had confidently declared acoustic dampening a fantasy. Gretton lays out the results. Hydrophone detection range cut from 12 miles to 400 yards, a staggering 97% reduction. The room explodes. This is absurd, Burris snaps. You've performed unauthorized alterations on a Royal Navy vessel, all on the advice of, pardon me, a cook. A cook who understands acoustics better than your entire department, Gretton shoots back. Commander, you are out of line, barks Captain Edmund Rushbrook, Director of Naval Intelligence. This sort of reckless tinkering could compromise. Compromise what? Gretton interrupts. Our current strategy of letting U-boats hear us from 50 miles away? That system is working brilliantly, sir. A tense silence falls until Admiral Horton raises a single hand. He turns toward Lawson. Explain it to me simply. Lawson feels every eye in the room burning into him. He's 28, an American merchant seaman, standing before the most powerful naval minds in Britain. But he speaks anyway. Sir, ship machinery vibrates. That vibration moves through the hull and into the water. Water absorbs vibration better than air or steel. If you place water-filled chambers around propeller shafts and engine mounts, you create barriers that keep the sound from reaching the ocean. It violates basic engineering principles, Burris protests. Putting water inside a ship's structure causes weight distribution problems, stability issues, corrosion. Not flooding, Lawson counters. Sealed chambers, positioned strictly for acoustic dampening, and we tested it. It works. One test, Burris scoffs. In a river, with a friendly submarine. That is hardly conclusive. Horton leans back in his chair, fingers steepled. What would it take to retrofit a convoy? Captain Rushbrook throws up his hands. Admiral, this can't be serious. The protest lands in the war room like a stone dropped into deep water. Officers exchange uneasy glances. The argument is obvious. Implementing this idea would mean altering hundreds of ships, diverting precious resources, installing technology no one has ever tried, all because of the testimony of one merchant cook and a handful of rushed test results. But before the descent can gather momentum, Gretton slices through it. Based on the fact that in March we lost 527,000 tons of shipping because the U-boats heard us coming, he snaps. Based on the fact that if we don't try something different, we lose this war by autumn. The room freezes. Even the air seems to pause. Dr. Burris clears his throat carefully, like a man stepping across thin ice. Admiral, even if the concept has merit, implementing it is impossible. We'd need to retrofit 2,400 merchant ships. The dockyards are overloaded. Steel is already earmarked for escort vessels. We're asking for a minimum of 6 weeks per ship, which means it doesn't take 6 weeks, a quiet voice interrupts. Every head turns. It's Lawson. Admiral Horton studies him. Mr. Lawson, explain. Lawson swallows but stands firm. The prototype on Sunflower took 3 days. This isn't complex engineering. You weld sealed chambers around existing machinery, fill them with water, and that's it. Any dockyard crew can install it. Any ship's engineer can maintain it. And we don't need to retrofit the entire fleet immediately, just enough ships to test the idea in real convoy conditions. For a heartbeat, the room is still. Then, like a YouTube narrator breaking the fourth wall, the storyteller inside the moment adds an unspoken hook. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. We're moments from the unauthorized test that changed the entire Battle of the Atlantic. Captain Rushbrook leans forward, steepling his fingers. And if it fails, if we strip resources for this experiment, and it collapses under combat conditions, we'll have wasted weeks we do not have. If we don't test it, Gretton counters, we've already lost. Admiral Horton rises. Instantly, everyone else follows suit. He walks to the window, gazes out at the tempest breaking over the docks, and stands there long enough for doubt to creep in. Finally, he turns. "Commander Gretton," he says, his voice steel-edged, "you will retrofit 6 merchant ships in convoy on 184, departing Liverpool in 8 days. Mr. Lawson, you will supervise installation and train the engineers. Dr. Burris, will provide technical support, even if you believe this entire endeavor is madness. If it works, we implement fleet-wide. If it fails..." He fixes Gretton with a glare. "You'll spend the rest of the war commanding a minesweeper in the Orkney Islands. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." Horton's gaze shifts to Lawson. "Mr. Lawson, I do not know whether you're a genius or a madman, but I do know we are desperate. Do not make me regret this." Lawson straightens, throat tight. "I won't, sir." April 11 to 18, 1943. HM Dockyard, Liverpool. 6 merchant ships roll into dry dock to receive Lawson's modifications. SS Daniel Webster, SS James Herod, SS John Davenport, SS Samuel Elliott, SS Benjamin Kai, and Lawson's own SS William Eustace. The process is brutally straightforward. Teams weld 24-inch cylindrical steel chambers packed with seawater around the propeller shaft housings. They install water-filled rubber bladders braced against engine mounts and steam line supports. The added weight? 18 tons per ship. Total installation time, 64 hours. Naval engineers look at the setup with unconcealed skepticism. One mutters, "Looks like someone jury-rigged a plumbing system into the engine room." He isn't entirely wrong, but the hydrophone tests tell a different story. Before modification, a Liberty ship's acoustic signature is detectable at 11.7 miles. After, 0.4 miles. The ships are 29 times quieter. April 22nd, 1943. Convoy on 184 departs. Liverpool, 43 merchant ships in 9 columns, shielded by 6 corvettes and 2 destroyers. The 6 modified vessels are spread deliberately, 2 on the starboard side, 2 port, 2 center. The convoy commodore knows nothing about the experiment. If the U-boats attack, the test will unfold under the harshest conditions imaginable. German naval intelligence is already watching. 37 U-boats from Wolfpack Group Mauve move into position across the convoy's predicted route. April 25, 1943, mid-Atlantic. 2:14 a.m., aboard U-264. Capitan Lieutenant Hartwig Look studies his charts with the hunter's focus. His hydrophone operator has been tracking convoy noise for 6 hours, but something is off. "Contact weakening, Herr Kaleon," the operator says. "Original bearing 290, but signal intermittent. Some ships very loud, some almost silent." "Intermittent?" "Impossible," Looks growls. "Either you hear a convoy or you don't." "Ja, Kaleon. But I'm tracking multiple signatures. Some ships clear at 40 kilometers. Others vanish at 5. Looks orders U-264 to periscope depth. Through the lens, he sees the convoy, but the hydrophones should be roaring with the signatures of 43 merchant ships. Instead, they only register 27. 16 ghost ships. Except not 16. 10 are simply beyond hydrophone range. but 6 ships inside the convoy are producing no acoustic signature at all. Looks makes a decision that will save lives he will never meet. He fires only on the ships he can hear clearly. The modified vessels, quieter than the sea around them, slip past the wolf pack untouched. April 27, 1943. 600 miles west of Ireland, Wolfpack Group MUA finally punches through to convoy on 184. For 18 brutal hours, torpedoes slash through the columns. 9 merchant ships are lost. 3,200 men crowd into lifeboats. 47,000 tons of cargo sink into the abyss. But here is the number that matters most. Of the 9 ships sunk, not one is a modified vessel. Lawson's 6 water-dampened ships survive untouched. When on 184 reaches New York on May 7, 1943, Gretton sends an immediate signal to London. Modified vessels showed 0 enemy engagement, despite comparable positions within convoy formation. Acoustic dampening, effective under combat conditions. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation. Imagine a room thick with tension Admiralty House, May 12, 1943, where the Western Approaches Command spreads sheets of data across long wooden tables. These numbers will judge whether Tommy Lawson's discovery was a spark or a miracle. They begin with the baseline. March 1943, the dark days before acoustic dampening. The statistics are brutal. Average U-boat detection range, 11.4 nautical miles. Convoy ships lost in each Wolfpack engagement, 31%. U-boats lost per engagement, a mere 1.2. Then they compare those grim figures with the new reality. May through July 1943, after the widespread adoption of acoustic dampening, and the transformation is staggering. Average U-boat detection range, 0.6 nautical miles. Convoy losses per engagement, 4.7%. U-boats lost per engagement, 4.8. Think about that for a moment. Ship losses plunge by 85%, while U-boat losses surge by 400%. Submarines that once detected convoys from 50 miles away must now creep to within half a mile straight, into ASDIC, radar, even visual detection. The once fearsome Wolfpack doctrine collapses, simply because the hunters can no longer hear their prey. Then comes May 24, 1943. Black May month etched into German naval history. Allied forces sink 41 U-boats, fully 25% of Germany's operational fleet. Merchant ship losses dropped to 58, compared to 96 in March. Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz writes in his war diary that very day. The enemy has achieved technical supremacy in acoustic detection, which has robbed U-boat of their most effective weapon surprise attack. Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. We can no longer predict attack positions. The old certainties have vanished. A captured hydrophone operator from U-954 sunk on May 19, 1943, tells British interrogators, bewildered, "We could not understand what happened. Sometimes we heard convoy sounds from great distance. Other times, ships were practically on top of us before we detected them. It was as if the ocean had become silent." By July 1943, the revolution becomes fleet-wide. 847 Allied merchant ships have now received acoustic dampening. Installation time drops to just 48 hours per vessel. The cost, $20,000 per ship, less than a tenth of what it takes to construct a new vessel. From May to December 1943, the results speak for themselves. Allied merchant ship losses fall to 329, compared to 729 in the previous 8 months. 237 U-boats are destroyed. An estimated 4,200 merchant seamen who would have perished instead return home. The Battle of the Atlantic isn't won not yet. It will grind on until May 1945. But the tide has unmistakably turned. U-boats, once the hunters, have become the hunted. After the war, the testimonials begin. In 1946, Admiral Sir Max Horton writes in his memoir, "Among the many innovations that secured victory in the Atlantic radar, Huff Duff, Lee Lights, escort carriers. None were as simple or as effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A cook with no engineering training solved a problem that baffled our best scientists. Commander Peter Gretton, in his 1964 book, Convoy Escort Commander, adds, Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger. He never commanded a ship. But he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius was seeing what everyone else missed, that the solution wasn't more technology, but better use of the ocean itself. The production numbers between April 1943 and May 1945 are astonishing. 47 Allied merchant ships fitted with Lawson's acoustic dampening system. 164 Royal Navy escorts modified. 51,000 tons of steel used less than what's required to build 7 Liberty ships. Total cost, $6.22 million, roughly $400 million in 2024. The system becomes standard on all U.S. Navy surface vessels after the war, evolving into the Prairie Masker noise reduction system still used today. Modern Prairie Masker relies on compressed air bubbles instead of static water chambers. But the principle remains identical. Create a barrier to hide machinery. Noise from the ocean's ears. And what of the man who set all of this in motion? Thomas Patrick Lawson received the British Empire Medal in June 1945 in a modest ceremony in London. He refused interviews. He refused publicity. When the New York Times asked him for a story in 1947, he declined, saying simply, I just noticed something and mentioned it. Other people did the real work. After the war, he returned to Boston, opened a small diner in Dorchester, married, raised 3 children, and never publicly discussed his contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic. His wife did not learn the full scope of his achievement until 1978, when a British naval historian tracked him down for a study on convoy innovations. Lawson died in 1991 at age 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe described him as a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran. There was no mention of acoustic dampening, no mention of the 4,200 lives saved, no mention that a high school dropout with a notebook reshaped naval warfare forever. But at his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers quietly attended, men who had sailed on convoy escorts in 1943 and survived because U-boats couldn't hear their ships approaching. One placed a note in Lawson's casket. Because of you, we came home. And the lesson? In 2011, the U.S. Naval Academy added Lawson's story to its leadership curriculum, summarizing it with a truth as powerful as any weapon. Innovation doesn't require credentials. It requires observation, courage, and the willingness to challenge expert consensus. Lawson didn't succeed because he was trained in acoustics. He succeeded because he noticed what no one else did. The most dangerous phrase in warfare isn't, "That's impossible." It's, "We've always done it this way." And today, every U.S. Navy surface warship carries a descendant of the water-filled chambers, a merchant cook sketched in his notebook 80 years ago. Sometimes victory comes down to one person seeing what everyone else overlooks and having the courage to speak.